Sciences and also the president of the Faculty Association. And so today I will be talking to you about dossiers because we use dossiers in both the tenure and promotion process. But as we start, what I'd like is for everybody to kind of introduce themselves. And I want to talk a little bit about what format you want me to use today, because I can do it a variety of ways. I just want to make sure I'm giving you the information that you need. So whoever wants to start, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. This is Melanie. Can you hear me? Can you see me?
Can't see you, but I can hear you, Melanie.
Okay. All right. I turned my camera on. I don't know. All right. So I'm Professor Zollner. I have been teaching at Highlands for a few years. This is my first year as tenure on the tenure track. And so I think this is very important for me.
Excellent. We can see now.
Yeah, and I want to be prepared ahead of time. I like being organized and not wait until the last minute.
Yeah. I think that's where we go, because that's the one thing about the dossier process. You can't leave it to the end because it's a neurotic process.
Yes, I understand.
So good job.
Yeah. So it'll be great if you can show us the format. I appreciate that. Thank you.
One of the things we'll be doing. Excellent.
All right. Thank you.
Hello, this is Carol Ibarra. I'm teaching Spanish in the Languages and Cultures Department. This is my third semester teaching, but last year I was a visiting assistant professor. This year I'm an assistant professor, so I also want to be prepared ahead of time. Thank you for offering this this workshop. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, welcome. Who wants to go next?
All right, I will go next. This is Sansuk Park. I am an associate professor in curriculum and instruction. I'm going up for my full professor at the promotion for my full professor this time. And I actually did electronic dossier. So maybe you can clarify a little bit more about that process.
Oh, absolutely. I'll talk to you.
Okay, thanks.
Son?
Hey everybody, I'm Ben Villarreal. I'm a professor in the English department, and I am actually putting the finishing touches on my fourth year review dossier right now. So this is just to maybe get any last minute questions I haven't thought of answered.
Perfect, excellent. We'll make sure to talk about that, Ben. Thanks. Who else? I have a lot of people.
Hi, everyone. Eric Griffin here, second year assistant professor in biology. So thanks very much for having this. And I'm going to have to turn my video off. My internet has been pretty spotty this morning, but thank you.
Oh, no problem. Welcome.
Hey, everyone. Morgan Barnard here, Media Arts and Technology, my first year, and looking forward to hearing more about the process and getting some good information. Thanks for having me.
Welcome.
This is Rod Sanchez from the business department, and I'm just interested in learning about the tenure process.
Excellent. Rod, we'll be talking specifically about the dossier today, but if there's any questions I can help you with, just email me too.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sebastian Medina, first year assistant professor in the Department of Biology. So glad to be here, learn more about building a dossier, and look forward to that in the future. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Sebastian.
Hi all, Kevin Enzer. I'm an assistant professor of counselor education at the Rio Rancho campus. And so in my fifth year, I went through my fourth year review last year. So Kathy, I know enough to be dangerous. I need you to take me to the next level there.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jen Aldred, and I'm really happy to be here. And I'm a first year. This is actually my first real day as a faculty member at New Mexico Highlands. So woohoo! But I am a visiting assistant professor in the Natural Resources Management Department, teaching environmental geology courses. And hoping that, in 3 years, I'm on a retained 3-year contract, that maybe there might be the possibility that my position becomes permanent. So I just want to stay ahead of the game and learn a little bit about creating a dossier. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Welcome, Jennifer. Who's next?
All right, well, good morning. I'll go. My name is Ben Vickers. I'm assistant professor of health and exercise and sports sciences department. And I'm lucky to work with Dr. Jenkins closely. So I'm looking forward to this video. And good morning to everybody.
Thanks, Ben. Appreciate it.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Luke Ritter, Assistant Professor of American History. Kathy, you may recognize me from the Academic Affairs Committee. Our first meeting is tomorrow. But yeah, this is my first year. So I'm looking forward to any advice or recommendations you have. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jennifer Clutch. This is my first year at New Mexico Highlands. I'm an assistant professor in the Department of Forestry, and I'm looking forward to learning about dossiers. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, Jennifer. We have a couple people who haven't gone, but you don't have to. I won't force you to do anything. Well, let me go ahead and get started. I have a short presentation. What I'd like to do today is share my screen. I'll give you a PowerPoint that really discusses the overall schematics of a dossier and some of the things that we recommend. It aligns with Article 23 in the CBA perfectly. And then also from years of experience that a number of us have on not only the tenure and promotion process for ourselves, but also as serving as members of the tenure and screening committee, which I'll talk a little bit about with you as well. And so with that, I'll go ahead and share my screen. If you have questions during the process, just ask them. And what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and just come back to the screen so that I can see you all and we'll go on from there. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we'll go ahead and begin. Let me make it bigger for you. I do it this way so I can see my outline on the side. So today, as I said, what we're going to do is I'll do a short presentation about the dossier process itself, what goes into a dossier, the overall appendix where you can find it in the CBA. You'll have opportunity to ask questions. Hopefully I'll have the answers. And if I don't, I'll get them for you. And then if you want any follow-up afterwards, if you need any more sessions or you need some more information, we can talk about that at the end as well. One of the first things I want to start with is probably one of the most important things that you need to remember when putting together a dossier. And it's that you need to know your audience. Some of the audience are your peers. Those are the easy ones to present the dossier to. They're the people that work with you every day. They understand your content. They understand your job. They know a little bit more about you because you work with them every day. They're the people in your department. But we also have the dean, the vice president of academic affairs, and provost looking at your dossier. They may know you, but not know you well. They may not know your field. They may not know everything that you're doing or everything that you're even teaching. And so that's a different audience. And then the third audience would be the members of the tenure and promotion committee. Sometimes people on that committee who would be evaluating your dossier may not have ever met you. I remember Christina Duran told me a couple years ago, Kathy, you're on my tenure committee. And it's like, oh, sometimes you meet people after the process is over. And so you're literally just looking at the dossier in front of you, doing an evaluation on what you see, and you don't bring in any other additional information. And so with that in mind, you have to remember to explain things, to present things. Don't assume that people know things about you because they may not. And again, they may not have ever met you. Or maybe it's like what Luke said, maybe only in a meeting at academic affairs. You know, I don't know a lot about you, Luke, except I see you at academic affairs and I do hear you talk there. And so again, the number one thing when putting together this dossier, think about, do you know your audience? Don't assume that they know you. Don't assume that they understand your content. And so think about that when you're putting it together and explaining the different sections. For the dossier itself, think of it as a collection of your life, a collection of your professional career, but only as it relates to the position in which you were hired in and the previous 5 years. Our tenure process is a 6-year process. And so in the 6th year, a person goes up for tenure and promotion. Tenure is performed at the rank of associate professor. And so if somebody's an assistant professor and they go up for tenure, they'll also go up for promotion automatically because the assessment for associate professor and tenure are identical. If somebody is already an associate professor going up for tenure, they'll stay in their rank and they would only be applying for tenure. And then we also have people that are applying for full professor. Full professor is at a different type of analysis because there are higher expectations for people going to full professor. Basically, your dossier should align to the CBA. There is an appendix, Appendix A, at the very end of the CBA that gives you the outline for what is required to be in your dossier itself. And then again, what you want to do is make sure you have 5 years worth of data. What we're not wanting to see is 30 years of your career. We only want to see the last 5 years. If it hasn't all been at Highlands because you were given years towards tenure and promotion, that's okay. Include up to 5 years worth of information. And again, make sure it aligns with the job description for which you were hired. And so you know what it is. The job description listed the expectations, so make sure that you're bringing those highlights out in the dossier that you have as well. Another thing about the dossier that's really important to remember is part of it is narrative and part of it is going to be a representative documentation that you have to support your narrative. You should never have documentation in your dossier that you haven't explained in the narrative, and you should always have documentation that supports your narrative. Just like we require with our students when they write a paper, right? Always have documentation, always have references. And so that's what we expect in a dossier as well. As I shared, the dossier outline is located in Appendix A of the CBA. Use this as a template. It'll say exactly what format you should be in, exactly what order that format should be in. And you want to make sure that you follow exactly that order. Don't rearrange it because you think A should be before B because it makes more sense. Do it exactly in that same order. Now, the other thing to remember is some departments have additional requirements or additional expectations. And so make sure you talk to the peers in your department so that you understand if there are additional things that they would like to see. All of us are evaluated on the triad, teaching, service, and research. So obviously the dossier is going to have those sections. Now, the reason I put that here is that sometimes departments and disciplines, as I shared, have some different expectations. One of those expectations might be about service. I know one department that thinks that every single faculty member should serve on 2 faculty senate committees. Well, that's not possible in every department, but it's an expectation of that department. And so you'd want to make sure that your dossier shows that you're meeting the expectation of your peers. That's not a CBA expectation, that's a peer expectation. Now, another thing to remember is you can provide more information than the outline, but not less. So that's really important. And the way that we try to help, and I'm going to stop my share just for a second, the way we try to really help people on this process is that when you have it all together, we make you go to your department chair. In the School of Social Work, we may make you go to your dean because you don't have chairs. But we make you go to your department chair, and your department chair's responsibility is to take that outline in Appendix A, take your dossier, and just check that you have everything that's required. They're not going to evaluate the content. They're not going to say whether or not it's good enough or what the quality is. They're just going to do a quick check to make sure you didn't forget anything, to make sure everything is there. And so we do that in the first step of the process. So that department chair has some responsibilities working with everybody, going up for either tenure or promotion. And again, it's just that we don't want people to forget things, because you don't want to get denied tenure or promotion because you forgot a section, right? That would be awful. We want to make sure that this process is very fair. So that's what that signature process is. So let me go ahead and share my screen again, and we'll continue. So next thing, some things to remember. And so one thing to remember is that almost probably 99% of the faculty at Highlands want you to succeed. I would hope that 100% of the faculty at Highlands want you to succeed. So the big thing is ask for help. Don't do this on your own. Ask to see your colleagues' dossier. You all have a mentor. Ask to see your mentor's dossier. Once you're starting to create things, ask them to check it over for you to say, hey, does this make sense? The more people that check your dossier along the way means that the stronger that your dossier will be. And you know that when you write a paper or create something like a dossier, the closer you are to it, the harder it is to see errors, because you read things into it that may or may not be there to other people that are looking at it. So it is quite the process, because it's quite the document that you're going to be creating. It's about your professional life for the last 5 years. So have people help you, have people evaluate it, have people check it out for you to make sure, again, that it makes sense. Another thing that we get is sometimes with documentation might need to be in a couple different places. And a question we get is, well, if I need to put professional development, this conference that I went to, under teaching, does that mean I can't also use it under research? And the answer is no. You can have documentation appear in more than one place, the same bit of documentation, because the different parts of the dossier support the triad. And so something might be appropriate to teaching, it might be appropriate to service, and it might be appropriate to scholarship and research as well. And so it is okay to do that. So overall, if you look at Appendix A in the CBA, and again, it's at the end of our CBA, it basically asks for 7 things. It wants a cover letter. I'll talk to you about that. It wants a self-evaluation, which is a form similar to our annual evaluation form. It asks for a narrative history of your career at Highlands, what you've done, what your expectations are, just a little bit about yourself. It asks for information about teaching and advisement, then scholarship, research, and creative activities and service, so the areas of the triad. And then the last part is it wants a current curricular vita for you, so a curriculum vita. And so let's look quickly at each of those portions, because I want to make sure we have time for you guys to ask questions. So the cover letter. The cover letter has a purpose, and its purpose is to inform your readers what it is that you're trying to apply for. Are you applying for tenure? Are you applying for tenure and promotion? Are you applying for promotion? And so be very, very specific in what you are requesting your reader to evaluate. If you are up for tenure and you're also applying for full professor, because that does happen, you do need to put that in your cover letter. As I said at the very beginning of our conversation today, when you apply for tenure, it's at the rank of associate professor. And so if somebody is already an associate and they want to apply for full professor while they're applying for tenure, 2 different analyses of the dossier have to take place. One for tenure at the rank of associate, the other is a higher evaluation at the rank of full. And so again, be very, very specific. Next, make sure that your cover letter also briefly explains a little bit about you. It'll be an introduction of you to your audience. Make sure you put in here, were you granted any years towards tenure and promotion? Sometimes people are, sometimes people aren't. If you're new to the profession, you probably weren't given any time towards tenure and promotion, but if you were, make sure you tell your reader at the very beginning, because it can be confusing for the reader to evaluate somebody, and they'll say, well, how come there's only 3 years worth of data here if you never explained that you were given 2 years towards tenure or something like that. And then, so like I said, explain a little bit about yourself. You're introducing yourself. Remember, there is going to be a narrative history of you at Highlands as well. That will be a lot more detailed. Next is that self-evaluation. The self-evaluation is a form that you will get from the Office of Academic Affairs. It's an official form for the tenure and promotion process. It's very similar to the annual evaluation form, except that on this form, you'll be expected to put an analysis of yourself for the last 5 years, because it's over why you deserve tenure or why you deserve promotion or why you deserve both. Some people also in this section, after they fill out the self-evaluation, like to put other evaluations in there. That's fine. That's an example of additional information that you might want to put in if you want, but it's not required. Sometimes department and peer reviews here, chair reviews here. And again, it's not mandatory. The only thing that is required is that you do the self-evaluation for tenure or promotion. And again, it is a specific form that you will need to get. The third section is the narrative history at Highlands. There isn't an overall required outline here, but here's some of the things that we recommend because it will help introduce you and your professional life to the different audiences that we spoke about at the beginning. Again, some people may not have ever met you who are evaluating your dossier. So when were you hired? What's your position? Do you have more than one position? Some people do. Were you granted time towards tenure and promotion? Explain it. Do you have any release time? Because people need to see that, because they might add up your coursework and say, hey, you're not teaching enough credits. And because they didn't understand that you also have release time to do something else. And if you do have release time, explain the other activity that you're doing to make up for the teaching release. Also, briefly explain parts of your CV. So what do you teach? What are your research interests? Do you have any grants? What kind of service do you do to the university or outside the university for your profession, et cetera? So it's a couple pages about yourself. There's no required length, but again, you're just introducing yourself to your readership. And so this section is just about you. It probably is one of the hardest sections for people to write because people have a hard time writing about themselves. And so you have to remember your audience may not know you. So take some time here. The next section gets into the first part of the triad. And so now we're going to be looking at teaching, research and service. So the first area is teaching. Under teaching, there are some requirements. First, you have to develop and write your teaching philosophy. And so this is a section, and this is, again, something if you go and ask your mentor or ask members of your department to look at theirs, you'll kind of get a good idea of what the teaching philosophy section can look like. It can actually look like anything you want it to look like, but I think getting other ideas as a template is very, very helpful. Then the second is you want a narrative history of your teaching and advisement activities while you were at Highlands. Some things you can consider in this section would be like some departments want to see every course that you've taught by the semester, as well as the enrollment in each of those courses. I know our department likes that in exercise and sports sciences. Bring out what courses you've taught face-to-face, what courses you've taught online, what courses are asynchronous. So talk about the different methods of teaching that you've used. Talk about if you've developed any new courses, use any sort of innovative teaching. Make sure also to remember to talk about your advisees. How many students do you advise? What different programs do you advise for, et cetera? And then any other information you can think about that you think relates to your teaching and advisement. This is just a suggested list. Once you do that, you also want to put, the CBA says, and this is an important thing we need to talk about, the CBA says that you need a copy of all your student evaluations for the last 5 years. However, at Highlands, we've had a problem with our student evaluation process. We've been working with Roxanne's office. There'll be some calls going out soon. We hope to have a new student evaluation process up by next fall. But at Highlands, you cannot right now put in student evaluations for the last 3 years. If you do, they will be used against you. even if they're positive. And the reason is we don't know whether or not they're valid. Students were able to check their grades before they did their student evaluations. And so we have thrown out course evaluations. So don't use comments, don't use student evaluations because you think they look good. They will be used against you because it would be viewed as unethical to use them. They might be too good, they might be too bad, your evaluations. We have no idea what the impact on students being able to interfere with the process has been. And so please do make sure that you don't have those evaluations in for the last 3 years. If you have them for the 2 years previous, go ahead and use them, but nothing recent, unless you did it on your own. Some faculty do their own student evaluations, but not through our evaluation process. After that, you need copies of your observations of classroom teaching. Faculty in your department are required to send you an evaluation of your teaching once a year. All tenured peers are required to do this. If you haven't gotten observations of your classroom teaching, then make sure that you remind people to get it. Say, hey, you know, I need you to evaluate me, please. That's really important. Do you have a question, Ben?
Yeah, just on the student evaluations, just to make sure I'm clear on the dates. It's everything from fall 18 forward. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. And fall 18 is a little iffy as well, but that's when we discovered it. And so it's a problem, and it's hard because a lot of our evaluations are good and you want to use that stuff, but it's not valid. And so that's all we know so far. And so hopefully we'll get that process fixed.
Does that mean that we should include fall 18 or we should not include it?
You can include fall 18.
Okay.
What I would do, Ben, in your dossier is just say, as a reminder, I'm not including my student evaluations.
Right. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
You bet. So copies of classroom observations, make sure you have them. All your peers were required to do them. The dean is required to do it. The chair is required to do it. And so if you haven't seen people or they haven't evaluated you, just remind them gently and they'll get that done for you. And then finally, you should have professional development activities related to your teaching. So what have you done? This right here is professional development. Sometimes some of the sections that we go to in our professional development days, or if you do things at the CTE, that would count. If you do things in your profession or outside, other webinars, especially in today's society that you might be attending, that all would count here. And so make sure if you have documentation, like you attended a conference and went to a presentation on teaching, that you don't just put in the program, but that you also explain it a little bit in the narrative that we talked about on the slide before. And then any other thing that you want to put in here that you think counts towards teaching, certificates, sometimes conference programs, etc. But again, remember, don't just stick things in. Make sure it's all referred to from your narrative so that it makes sense and people know why it's there. Research, scholarship, and creative activities is the next section. So the second area of the triad. Here, what's important to realize is that each department has its own criteria for research, scholarship, and creative activities. So make sure you have those right now, way before you go out for tenure and promotion. Make sure you have them now so you know what the expectations are. And it is required that you actually put a copy of your department's research and scholarship activities criteria, in your dossier, because your readers have to be able to evaluate you as well. And every department is different. So in this section, make sure you have a narrative history. Again, what have you published? What have you presented? Do you have grants? What are you currently working on? That counts too. What is your time being devoted to? And so again, make sure that you're explaining everything to your reader. Try to stay away from jargon words that are specific to our disciplines, because many times your readers don't understand the jargon. And so make sure, again, that it's a very readable section, especially because we're talking about people's research and creative activities. Some departments, for example, in terms of differences, count working with graduate students on theses, just as they count peer-reviewed journals. Some departments require that you publish in peer-reviewed journals. Other departments do not. So make sure you know that what your department's criteria are. When you do include your department's criteria, make sure that you organize this section in the same order, because your readers will be looking at that outline, and it's easier if it all lines up and it goes in the same order, because that way they can make sure that you're meeting your department's criteria. Same as before, then you want to put in your documentation. And so put a list of your publications, presentations, recitals, shows, funded research, or anything else that counts as documentation in this area. Make sure, again, and I've said it and I'll say it again and I'll say it 1,000 times, don't just stick things in here. Make sure that you explain everything in your narrative. Don't forget also to include any sort of professional development you've done that relates to research, scholarship, and creative activities. And then, of course, any additional information that you want it to have in there. And then lastly, for the triad is the service component. Again, it's just a recommended outline. It's put in a narrative for your last 5 years at Highlands. Make sure you talk about the service that you've done for the university first. That's the most important. You'll see that in the CBA. What you do on faculty senate committees, what you do for the university, what you do for your department. Make sure you talk about that first, then talk about your profession, talk about your community involvement if you like. But again, your university work is the most important here, because we want to make sure that all faculty are invested in Highlands. Full professors, people going up for full professorship, need to show leadership, because the criteria for full professor is that you were a leader in your service. And so make sure you highlight your leadership if you're going for full professor. And then, of course, make sure you provide any documentation that supports your service. And then the last section overall is just your up-to-date CV. It should be a complete CV, not just your time at Highlands. This is the only part of the dossier that's not going to be about the last 5 years. And so make sure also that it really covers all parts of the triad. So if you haven't talked about service, make sure you get that on your CV, et cetera. And so, and again, it's not a shortened CV, it's your entire CV for this area. Next thing I want to talk about just real briefly are letters of recommendation. Letter of recommendation are not required for a dossier, although a lot of faculty like to get them. Letters of recommendation show that people support you. It demonstrates that somebody's already looked at what you've accomplished in the last 5 years and think that you deserve promotion or deserve tenure. Most people, though, that you ask to write a letter of support will only write it about what they know about you. So, for example, if I serve on a committee with you and you ask me to write you a letter of recommendation, I would only write it about service, because I only know you in that one area. I don't know about your teaching. I don't know about your research. If we're working together on a grant, then I would write it about working together on a grant. And so remember that people will write a letter of recommendation based on what they know about you. And so because of that, you're going to put the letters of recommendation, if you want them, in the appropriate part of your dossier. And so some people put general ones at the beginning, and they'll put ones related to teaching under the teaching section, research under the research section, et cetera. So put them where they belong in your dossier, and make sure if you use letters of recommendation that you have them that support all areas of your triad. You can also get letters of recommendation from experts in the field, so people who don't even work at Highlands. So if you want to send your dossier, some faculty do, to somebody else to evaluate before it starts the tenure and promotion process, you can do that and have that person's letter of recommendation in the very front of your dossier. That's possible. It's not required at Highlands that we have an external review. And so that's not necessary. You can have faculty, administrators, whoever you like, people you work with, evaluate your dossier as you go through. If you've served on committees, you can ask your committee chair that you worked with to evaluate it or to write you a letter of recommendation. And so again, just put your letters of recommendation, if you want to use them, in the appropriate part of your dossier. So put them where they belong. So I said this at the beginning, and I just want to say this again at the end. Know your audience. Some of the people that evaluate you are going to know you. Some of the people aren't going to know you at all. Some people are going to know some things about you, but not everything about you. Even if you work with somebody every single day, whenever you pick up a dossier, you go, wow, I didn't know that this person was doing X or Y or Z. This is really cool. You learn things about your peers. And so make sure that you're explaining things. And because we get so close to dossiers when we create them, we really do recommend that you share them with your colleagues, share them with your mentors, share them with people to make sure that they make sense before you turn them in the same way. Remember that you have academic freedom, but also all of your peers have academic freedom. And what that means is people who evaluate you have the right to evaluate you the way they want to evaluate you. Right? They have that right. They have a right to say, I don't like the fact that you use PowerPoints in your teaching. It's like, what? Everybody uses PowerPoints. I mean, it's like the craziest thing in the world. They have a right to their opinions. So as a part of this process, we recommend that you always talk to your peers, especially because they're the ones who know you the best. Talk to your peers. Talk to them about what their expectations are as you go through the tenure process so that nothing is a surprise. Tenure and promotion should not be a surprise. You've been going through annual evaluation for a number of years. You've been going through a reappointment for a number of years. You work with your peers. You work with the university for a number of years. And so you should have an open line of communication with all of your peers. And so know what their expectations are. Know what they want to see in a dossier. And then that way, this process is a lot easier as you go through. All right, that is my presentation for you today. Just tried to hit the highlights of a dossier as it applies to the CBA and to Appendix A. What kind of questions do you guys have?
Hi, Kathy. Thank you so much for that. One of my questions was, well, so if we conduct kind of our own evaluations from students, which can guarantee anonymity, is that something that we could use?
Yes, absolutely. You can use it. Now, depending, it's up to everybody to see what kind of weight they want to give that. But absolutely, you can be doing your own evaluations. And that's really what we recommend for people right now. If you've been able to do that, to go ahead and continue until the university's evaluation system is up and running again. But good one. Yeah, absolutely, Eric. That's good.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Hey, Kathy, this is Ben. I was just a little confused. I hope I'm not the only one. What the difference is between tenure and promotion? I was under the impression they're the same thing.
Nope, they're not. So tenure is it's an award is one way to look at it, right? When you're tenured, you could be tenured at any rank. You could be tenured as an assistant professor, an associate professor, or a full professor. And so tenure is an award. A tenure gives you longevity at the institution where you get tenure. Being an assistant, associate, or full professor, those are your rank. There are only 3 ranks right now at Highlands for faculty, and those are assistant, associate, and full professors. And I'm talking faculty on the tenure track. And so as an assistant professor, and this is in the CBA in Article 23, and there's also a section in the 23 towards the end that talks about ranks of faculty. But assistant professors are beginners. Their expectations aren't as high. We expect that they're teaching, we expect that they're reflective and that they're informant, they inform their practice, so to speak, that they advise students, that they participate in all areas of the triad. Associate professors have more expectation. We expect to see more investment in teaching, more investment in advising, more investment in your scholarship and your research, as well as your service. And so tenure at New Mexico Highlands University, our tenure system is evaluated at the rank of associate professor. So here's where the confusion comes in, Ben, and it's a great question. If you're hired as an assistant professor and you go up for tenure, you'll get tenure and promotion if you pass the process, because tenure is evaluated at the rank of associate professor. Okay. And so, but they're two different things. One is your rank and one is your longevity, so to speak. And so once you are an associate professor, you can stay as an associate professor for the rest of your life if you like. You never have to apply for full professor. Full professor is the highest rank of faculty, and it's optional. If you want to apply for full professor, then the expectations are even higher. As I shared with you, we expect publications, we expect leadership on committees, leadership at the university, really helping to drive your profession, being very, very invested. And so we have all three ranks of faculty at Highlands. We have one assistant professor who is tenured, because that's a part of our old system. Our old system had you apply for tenure and promotion separately. But about 10 years ago, we changed the system, and now tenure and promotion are at the rank of associate professor. Does that make sense, Ben? So you'll be going for both.
Yes, thank you very much for that. I appreciate that.
You bet, you bet. It's a great question. It's a great question, definitely. Excellent. Anybody else?
This is Morgan Barnard here. There's a question in the chat that I would also like some clarification on.
Oh, reappointment, sure. Reappointment is different. So let me back up a little bit and just briefly describe our evaluation process. So our evaluation process is outlined in Article 23 of the CBA evaluation. And so the evaluation process has three prongs. The first prong is annual evaluation. Annual evaluation evaluates you at your current rank. It doesn't look at tenure. It doesn't look at promotion. It doesn't say, are you getting better? Are you moving towards tenure? It has nothing to do with that. It says, at whatever rank you were hired at, are you meeting the expectations of that rank or not? That's what the evaluation is. And so annual evaluation is very informal for people in their first year. It's more formalized for everybody in year 2 through 5. And the reason for that is we want to make sure everybody's doing their job at whatever rank you're doing. Reappointment is the next part of the process. Reappointment asks your peers to evaluate you, not on what you're doing, but on whether or not you are progressing towards the next step. So if you are a tenure track faculty member, are you progressing towards tenure? It is possible, I want you to think about this. It is possible to be wonderful in rank. Like everybody's like, oh, this person meets expectations, they exceed expectations at their rank, and not get reappointed. Because reappointment means, are you progressing towards the next rank or the next or towards tenure? And if someone is stuck and they're not progressing and they're not moving forward their research agenda, their service agenda, or their teaching agenda, and your peers usually will talk to you about that for years. If all of a sudden they decide that you're not really progressing, then they will vote not to reappoint you. And so again, it's possible to have wonderful annual evaluations and not get reappointed. One is about your current rank, reappointment is about your next rank. So reappointment is going on right now. Reappointment begins at the beginning of the it ends, excuse me, at the beginning of the spring semester for people in year 2 and beyond. And so you should hear in the first week of school whether or not you were reappointed. That was a process where all the tenured faculty in your department got together and they met and they said, is that person progressing towards tenure? If they believe that you are, they'll evaluate you. Either way, they'll evaluate you. They'll send the recommendation to the dean. The dean then does the same thing. Is this person progressing towards tenure? The dean does the evaluation, sends it to the provost does the evaluation, and then notifies the faculty member whether or not they were reappointed. It would be very rare for somebody to come up for tenure who didn't pass tenure. It's possible, but the reason is we have a very strong reappointment process. And so you hopefully would have been told all along through the reappointment process, hey, you need to publish, hey, you need to publish. And all of a sudden, if you didn't publish, you wouldn't get tenure, right? And so people will be helping you out throughout. That's the reappointment process. And then the third prong is our tenure and promotion process. Does that help, Melanie? Explain it.
Yeah, is there something on the CBA that specifically says, okay, this is what they should be asking of you? Like
No.
for the reappointment?
Well, yeah, the expectations of tenure are listed in Article 23. So it tells you what you need to have for teaching. It tells you what you need to have for research and scholarship. That's your department, so you need that criteria. So get that from them. And then service expectations are in there. So that is explained in Article 23. Also, you should meet with your mentor, because one of your mentor responsibilities is to talk to you about expectations for tenure. Your mentor normally is in your department, and so they'll really help you in that process and really make sure that you're moving forward. And I want to share something I told you. 99%, hopefully 100% of the faculty at Highlands want you to succeed. And so people are very, very good here about sharing, talking, really helping others through the process.
All right, thank you.
You bet. Any other questions? Well, I have one question for you. Is there anything else you need presentation-wise? At the last faculty development days in August, and it happens every year, Roxanne, the provost, and I get together and we talk about the tenure process. And in January, we talk about dossiers. And so we kind of do it that way just to kind of keep people thinking about this every few months. Is there anything else that you'd like a presentation about from the CBA, something we can help you with? Jen.
Hi, I'm going to ask probably two maybe silly questions, but one, is the presentation that you just gave going to be available somewhere online to access? I took notes, but just in case there's something I want to refer back to.
No, of course, I'll send it to Veronica, of course, and it's a great question. I'm sure Veronica was going to ask in a few minutes.
I was.
Okay, awesome. And then secondly, this also might sound really silly, but what does CBA stand for? I'm not at the point yet where I've really started to look at the faculty handbook or really do any of that stuff, and I don't know what that stands for.
Not a problem. And so the faculty handbook applies to all faculty, contingent and tenure track. However, the tenured and tenure track faculty at Highlands are unionized. And so CBA stands for a collective bargaining agreement. So our working conditions are actually, and our salaries are negotiated. And so tenure and promotion, is a negotiated process. And so that's what the CBA stands for. And so our processes, evaluations, and things are negotiated. Now, that said, as a contingent, you're a contingent faculty member, you also have a contingent faculty handbook. Hopefully you've been given that as a contingent. The reason that's important is many of the policies in the contingent faculty manual are consistent with what we negotiated in our CBA. So we do things hand in hand. So we negotiate, then we change the contingent faculty because we like to keep people with the same expectations. Make sense?
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying it. I was like, what's the CBA? I was like, I bet you it's in the handbook. I haven't read yet. So.
Oh, not a problem. Not a problem. Not a problem. Don't you worry.
Thank you.
I have a couple of more quick questions, Kathy. First, so we talked about like it's the previous 5 years. Does that include the fall before you're submitting the dossier? Is it like 5? It does. Okay, that's my first question. And my second question is more like coming from the English professor in me. between the self-evaluation and all the different narratives, I'm finding that it's difficult to talk about the same things in different ways. How much of that plays into the evaluation of the dossier?
You know, it does for certain people. I remember when I was up for, I think it was full professor, you know, I'd already gotten through the tenure process and done my first dossier. I submitted it, and Gilbert Rivera was provost, and he came up to me and goes, "I had no idea you were a lifeguard." And it was like this one word that was in my teaching narrative. That was the first time I ever started teaching, was as a lifeguard. I taught swimming. And I was just looking at him like, oh my gosh, did you read every word? You know, it means different things to different people because we all have the right to evaluate. And I think it goes back to what I said is know your audience. You need to make it really exciting. There is nothing harder than writing about yourself, writing about your thoughts, and really remembering to brag about yourself. I don't know very many people that can brag about themselves. I don't, right? And that's one of our traits that we value, that people don't do that. And this is a process where we tell you brag about yourself. It's really hard to make that transition. And it's one of the most difficult things about the narratives. And so you have a narrative at the beginning, and then you have this narrative for teaching, one about scholarship and one about service. And that's where I think really going to talk to your peers, talk to your mentor, have others read it to make sure it makes sense. It's really important. It's amazing to me how many people really take the time to read the teaching narrative and the teaching philosophy, because they want to see that you're, you know, what you believe in, you know, what is it that you do? And then, you know, bringing out, there's a question from Carol in the chat box. It's kind of related. It's like, you know, with teaching, you know, sometimes we're doing asynchronous because of COVID, or just even some of the synchronous, asynchronous hybrid stuff we do. You know, our evaluations and everything that we're doing nowadays is different. I'll talk about how we do classroom observations for synchronous and asynchronous, and actually right now in just a minute. But and so we just have to figure out again who is our readership, so to speak. And Ben, that's one of the hardest things. Ask people to read it for you and provide feedback. And you know, I'm sure you know Brandon. I would give it to Brandon. Number one, because he's the dean and he's going to be evaluating you. And it's kind of like you're kind of seeing what he thinks about you ahead of time. But, you know, it's like give it to your peers, your mentor, et cetera, and ask for some help, because it's hard for every single person. And a lot of times when people are putting together these dossiers, they'll leave the narratives for the end because of the hardest things to write, or the philosophy. Oh, I'll write my philosophy later. And it's one of the hardest things to write because you're writing about yourself. In terms of observations, all classroom observations from last fall and this spring, because of COVID, are done in a very specific way. We have signed an MOA. Roxanne sent it out a couple times, but it's really important that we do things this way. There are no face-to-face evaluations allowed. And so this is what we've agreed to, and this is what we're doing. So in terms of any course that uses Zoom in any capacity, faculty are required to send a Zoom recording to their peers, to the chair and dean upon request. And that Zoom recording is being used to evaluate. So it's any course recording that you want to send to your peers for evaluation, that's fine. If you are teaching asynchronously or not using Zoom, then the only analysis that your peers can do is an analysis of your class website. And so they'll go on your class website, they'll read your discussion boards and look at your content and look at what it is that you're doing and all the different kinds of assessment and all those kinds of things. And they'll evaluate you that way. There's no live evaluation, not even in a Zoom classroom, allowable. And so that will not happen. And so again, it's off of a Zoom recording or an analysis of the website. Here's why. Many people are being forced into mentalities this year that they've never used before. And it's because of COVID. And teaching online, teaching asynchronously, teaching in a hybrid format or whatever, it takes a lot of professional development. And when you're forced into doing things quickly, you may not have had the professional development or the time and years of experience and reflection that you need in order to do a great job. And we respect that. It doesn't mean we can't learn. You know, we're encouraging people to move forward and to learn as much about online teaching as they can, because we don't know what the world is going to bring next semester or in the summer. And so, but at the same time, we're not going to hold you accountable for something that you never planned on doing. And so you never took the time to do the professional development because it wasn't a part of who you were or what you thought your teaching would ever be. Does that make sense?
It does. I do have a question following up on that. So I had my evaluation last semester, and I invited Dr. Arshad to come to my Zoom class, and I have been doing it for years.
Yeah, it wasn't allowable. So not allowable. So I actually know that was going on in the School of Business. Don't worry. I talked to Roxanne, and so it was actually stopped. There are no live classroom evaluations allowable under Zoom, and it's because of what I just explained to you.
Okay. So what happens with that evaluation?
Where you were told, well, Roxanne sent out an email saying that they all had to be set aside. So I would just ask him to evaluate a recording and include that instead.
Okay.
That's
all right. And it's only once a year?
Yeah, once a year. You can do it more often. Sometimes you also might have your mentor, whoever that is, do it more often with you. And so it's really up to you how you'd like to set it up. Sometimes faculty ask their peers to do it more often because they want a little bit more feedback. It's up to you. But yeah, it's once a year is the requirement.
Okay, so I can send the recording then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. It could be the same recording?
Yes.
Oh. Okay.
Huh?
Huh? Say that again. I'm sorry.
It makes it easier.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right, you guys. Well, thank you so much. If there's anything I can help you with, or if you have more questions, just email me, and we can figure it out and get you any sort of information you might need. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy.
And I did send you an email a minute ago.
Excellent.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Jenkins. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh, you bet. And Veronica, I'll email you the presentation in just a minute.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
You guys
and
take
thank you,
care.
everyone, for
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good semester. Next up on our agenda is using student-determined writing to foster engagement. We'll start that at 11 on the dot. So if you want to stick around, please do. Otherwise, take a couple of minutes break, get up, stretch your legs. We'll see you back here in about 2-3 minutes.